Well, good evening and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960 AM. I come to you every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock and bring you interesting, at least I hope, interesting interviews with some fascinating people. And tonight is going to be no exception because I found a gentleman, got recommended to talk to him, by the way. John Levitan is his name. He's running for the Liberal nomination in Spadina, Fort York, which is a riding right downtown Toronto. We're going to talk to him a little bit about that. But I got to tell you a little bit about this guy because, what a resume. Unbelievable. Lawyer, writer, filmmaker, musician, and actor living and working in downtown Toronto. As a lawyer, his practice was litigation, but also constitutional and administrative law. He's been counsel for some landmark cases, including the Sunday shopping law. But you gotta like this guy. He was actually an actor in an appearance on my favorite TV show of all time, The West Wing. He produced and features an Academy Award nominated and Emmy-winning short film, I Met the Walrus, was about when he met John Lennon when he was age 14. So, interesting guy. So with all those interesting things, why the heck would you want to become a politician?
Well, first of all, the name's Jerry, not John. Not that I care that much, but my first hero growing up was Superman, and then after that it became the Beatles, and then after that it became Pierre Trudeau. And growing up in Canada, in the ages of 13, 14, 15, 16. When Pierre Trudeau was the Prime Minister of Canada, it was an exciting time. It fit with all those pop culture things, the Beatles, the Kennedy era, hopefulness for what Canada's future could be, and an excitement growing up as a young Canadian. So Pierre Trudeau was my hero and got me interested in politics. I read everything I could about him, about the things he stood for, started to become very interested in Canadian history and Canadian politics, and became involved at a very young age in politics. Around 16, 17, I started to be involved in the Liberal Party, and that sort of got me to that state. And I actually went to law school for the very reason of going into politics. I didn't want to become a lawyer per se. I mean, who the hell wants to become a lawyer, right? But
people that want to make money.
Yeah, well, that was never, look, I don't object to money, but that was never my motivation growing up. So that was the reason I went to law school, and almost ran a couple of times over the years, but personal things, events in your history and timing, just didn't play out properly. So I pretty much gave up on politics. I did a lot of other things, some of which you've talked about in the meantime. Gave up on politics, but being the father of 5 kids in a variety of ages, from young to a little older than young, and you watch, the planet on fire as it is right now. I have 4 grandkids now, and I just find it a very compelling reason to try to do my bit and my share. If practicing law for the rest of my life is the future, I'd rather have some impact on my kids' lives, my grandkids' lives, and the world around me.
Now, Spadina, Fort York is probably a pretty challenging riding. You include Toronto Islands, all of the condos that are just been built in the former railway lands, and the King West Theatre District and all those condos along King and Queen West. Pretty, probably incredibly diverse ward. Do you include some of the sort of the Trinity, Niagara Trinity, south of Trinity Bellwoods Park area as well, I presume?
Some of it. It's basically it's the lake. To the east, it's Bay Street. To the north, it's Dundas, and then goes to Dufferin. But there are some variations to that that curves a little bit. But it's as dynamic as Toronto downtown as you can possibly get. And I've lived and worked here I've worked here for my whole adult life, but I've lived here since the mid 1990s. And I know it so well. I've raised kids here. Part of my practice has been representing restaurants and bars and nightclubs and theaters and the performing arts. And it's all here. And, you drive around Queen Street these days, Queen West, and, such a high percentage of the stores are out of business or closing. You see the impact on the arts community in downtown Toronto, and it's just been devastating. So it's, as you say, it's a pretty dynamic, or has been pretty dynamic area with so many different kinds of cultural activities, businesses, and families.
We're chatting tonight with Gerry Levitan, who is a candidate for the Liberal nomination for the provincial party, the Provincial Liberal Party, in an election that won't happen until October of 2022, unless I guess Doug Ford calls one early, which I don't think he'll do. And I presume the nomination is coming up soon, and you'll tell us a little bit about that. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back more with Gerry in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Gerry Levitan, who is a candidate for the Ontario Liberal Party nomination in Spadina, Fort York, which is riding right downtown. Includes Toronto Islands and all those condos that you see from the Gardiner Expressway up to Queen West. Actually, I'll guess all the way up to Dundas. And he's been an actor and a musician and a lawyer. So what a fascinating background. Gerry, I got to ask you, what did you do on West Wing? It's my favorite TV show.
Well, I since you're a journalist, I played you. It was towards the end of the West Wing, and I played a TV reporter who was covering Jimmy Smits. Was that his name? I think it was. Anyways, who was going to try to get the Democratic nomination after Martin Sheen was his term as president was ending. So I had a couple of heavy-duty scenes as a reporter, asking grilling questions like the ones you're asking now. But I got to tell you,
how'd you get a gig like that?
Well, I've been an actor since I was a kid. I've always done all kinds of acting things. I did theater when I was 13 and 14 in some relatively prominent plays. And about sometime in the 1980s, I thought, why don't I go back to acting to deal with the boredom of the practice of law. And I went to acting school in the night, took acting classes and got an agent, and then started to get a lot of work. I, did a lot of B-movie type work, a lot of commercials, a whole bunch of TV series from Kung Fu, The Legend Continues to, The West Wing. So it was, I was even in Trump, the unauthorized movie, right? Which was quite a while ago. It was about 8-9 years ago or something. If I recall correctly, my scene was talking to the actor who was playing Donald Trump, having a clandestine meeting in a parking lot. So,
and how did you meet John Lennon?
Well, I was 14. It was 1969. I was a Beatle fanatic, like so many other kids in those days, and the Beatles were still together. They would break up later on in 1969, but they were still together. And there was a rumor, I heard it on the radio on a Sunday night, that John Lennon was spotted at the Toronto airport. And that's all I needed to hear. I wanted to not just meet my hero, but actually communicate with him, connect with him. And it wasn't like a methodical plan or anything. I just felt this compelling need to meet my hero. And so I went down to the King Edward Hotel the next morning, which is where I thought he'd be, because the Beatles stayed at the King Edward Hotel in Toronto when they were on tour. I didn't go to school. So I'm 14, picture this, I'm 14. I go around 7 a.m. I go to the top floor of the King Edward Hotel. I knock on every door. wake up a lot of people. And there was one guy, you know, in his underwear, just started screaming at me. And then I bumped into a cleaning lady who said, are you looking for the Beatle? And I said, I am. And she said, he's in room, whatever. Don't tell anyone I told you. Went down, and to make a very long story short, knocked on the door. It opened up a little. I said, Canadian News. I barged in and looked at my feet as I was walking and sat down where there was a tripod, and 4 or 5 feet in front of me sat John Lennon and Yoko Ono in the middle of I think it was a CBC television interview. And I realized at that moment that my life had changed.
Why had your life changed?
I mean, even now, in retrospect, was there how many people, on one hand, could you count as being the most important, influential cultural people of our generation, my generation, and the periphery of my generation? I mean, John Lennon, the Beatles. I saw him. I could smell him. I watched him talk. He laughed as he saw this kid sit down. And the Beatles meant everything to me. You know, being a kid growing up at that time, you know, hearing a new Beatles song for the first time, what kind of clothes are they wearing? You know, how long should your hair be? What their views were about life, about love, about peace, about growing up, about dealing with other people. So it meant so much to me. And the fact that I was witnessing him in real time in a room with not that many people, I just felt it. I felt that I can still feel that feeling. I felt that I will not be the same. And what I didn't realize at that moment is that the day had just begun. And he let me hang out in his room for a few hours in the morning. He let me come back with a tape recorder so I could tape an interview. So I came back around 6 p.m. And at that point, word was out that he was here. And there were chairs lined up in front of his suite, single file, with reporters from everywhere, particularly New York, CBS, New York Times, because John Lennon hadn't been on Canadian soil for a couple of years. And they were, you could feel it. He was about to talk about the Vietnam War and go on record against that for the Beatles and whatever. And I started walking, and one reporter grabbed me and he said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I have an interview at 6." And they laughed, and he shoved me back. That moment, the door opened up. This is all true, Brian. I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. The door opened up, and the Beatles PR guy, a guy called Derek Taylor, opened up the door and said, "Where is the lad?" And I went, "Right here." And I walked in. He sat me down. He said, "John and Yoko will be sitting down in a moment." And at that moment, I realized I hadn't prepared one question. And you, being a seasoned journalist, you prepare. I mean, you sometimes you prepare for hours, sometimes you prepare for 20 minutes or whatever, but you prepare.
So what'd you ask him?
Well, I started off, and this was the best question. I said, "What can we as the young people of Toronto do to help you in your campaign for peace?" And he loved that question. And had I said, "Hey, what's the next Beatles record," or whatever, it would have turned him off, undoubtedly. So he started talking about peace and why he and Yoko were on this bet in for peace and this peace campaign. And I asked him some other questions about that, and we talked about youth culture, and I asked him about if the other Beatles were involved in his peace campaign. And little by little, it morphed into me asking questions about the Beatles and other things. And at one point, I asked him if he's planning to meet Pierre Trudeau. And he asked me why, whether he should, and I said, well, he's really cool. He's our prime minister, and he wants to do good things. And then he says, and it's on my audio tape. He says, well, if kids like you, like him, Yoko, maybe we should meet him. And I was a pivotal reason for John Lennon meeting Pierre Trudeau. He came back in the fall of 1969 and ultimately had a session with him. Anyways, we talked about those things and other things. And, one of my favorite aspects of the story is when John and Yoko sat down, there was a record playing on sort of a kid's turntable, a single. I don't know what the demographics are of your show, but if you're too young to know what a 45 single was, it would be the little record that would be turning around. And there was what was undoubtedly a Beatles song playing. And it was playing as he sat down. And I said, before the tape went on, I said, John, is that a new Beatle record? And he said, yeah, it's the Ballad of John and Yoko. It's coming out in about a week. I heard the Ballad of John and Yoko for the first time.
For anybody.
John Lennon, yeah. Sorry?
Is that Pierre Trudeau behind you?
It is Pierre Trudeau behind me.
Oh my God, you're kidding. You've got a bust of Pierre Trudeau on your desk?
I sure. Well, it's behind my desk.
Okay.
But, here's the thing. When I almost ran a couple of times, the first time I was going to run, I got a call from Paul Martin, who was, before he was the leader of the Liberal Party, he was helping John Turner with candidate search. And he called me up in my Toronto office. I was at a law firm, and he said, I understand that you'd be a good candidate for the Liberals. We're looking for someone young and a lawyer and so on and so forth. He said, would you come to Montreal and meet with me about it? And I did. But before I got off the phone, I said, well, I'm a Pierre Trudeau Liberal, and I'd want to speak to him. And he said, well, come to Montreal. You probably can arrange it. And it was arranged for me to meet Pierre Trudeau, who was then out of office. The first thing I said to him was, when his door opened, I said, I've had two heroes, the Beatles and Pierre Trudeau. And he said, well, I could understand the Beatles, but I'm just an ex-politician. So that started a friendship with him till his death. So Pierre Trudeau has been an important figure in my life, and I was blessed to get to know him.
So if Paul Martin was around, that was a couple decades ago, why didn't you run?
I had a young family at the time. I was thinking of leaving the law firm. It was just such an unsettled time for me, and going into politics can be a great sacrifice. So it just wasn't right. It wasn't right for me, and I just couldn't get the wherewithal to figure out what my legal career was going to be, what would happen if I was going to stay at the law firm that I was at. My kids were young. It was just a tough thing.
What were some of the big cases? You said you fought for Sunday shopping. Tell me some of the other cases that you fought for as a lawyer.
Sure. You might be aware of Russell Cashman Oliver, the guy who buys your jewelry, has a lot of wacky ads. He was sued by Time Warner, of all organizations, because he used to run TV ads in what looked like a Superman costume. You'd see him flying. And it was before the days of CGI, but he had a dollar sign instead of an S sign for Superman. And he was sued by Time Warner, had a big law firm in Toronto representing him at the time. And the lawsuit wasn't going to his liking, and he was exposed to huge legal fees and huge potential damages. And someone connected him with me, and I had to put in he asked me what kind of defense would I submit, and being an expert in Superman as well as some other things, my defense was Superman is entirely distinct from Cashman because Cashman is a middle-aged buyer and seller of jewelry. Right? B, Cashman was not born on the planet Krypton, various other things like that. And the result of it got huge publicity in the United States. So there was a lot of publicity, and they ran my statement of defense in their pieces, and it basically mocked Time Warner to the point that I got a call from Time Warner's lawyer, and he said, "Okay, what do you want? You've made your point." And I said, "Well, drop the lawsuit," and that's what happened. That's one case. I represented, all kinds of, cases. I represented, students who were strip searched, by in a public school in Ontario. I represented
because of drugs, or what was the justification?
Well, no, there was. I'm trying to remember the exact incident, but it was. I think money was missing from one kid's locker, so until someone would confess, they would check for the money. So it was a pretty important case. I represented a lot of human rights cases, a lot of cases in the Punjabi community, Sikh community, East Indian communities where there were racial incidents. I had one case where Mike Harris ran ads relative to teachers during the teacher strikes way back in the Mike Harris era, and I represented teachers who sued him for defamation. So I could go on and on and on, but
quite the breadth of career. We're chatting tonight with Gerry Leviton, who is a candidate for the Liberal Party candidacy nomination to run provincially in the October 2022 election. We're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to ask him about some of these policies that he hopes to work for. Stay with us. Well, we're back with Gerry Leviton, candidate for the Liberal Party nomination provincially in Spadina, Fort York, which is a riding right downtown Toronto. He's got an interesting career. He's met John Lennon. He's met Paul Martin. He's met Pierre Trudeau. He's been on the West Wing. He's a guitarist. He's a musician. He's an actor. He's been on numerous different shows, and he wants to give all that up, and including his seems like a reasonably successful litigation legal career, to run for politics in Ontario against Doug Ford. Why would you want to do all that?
Well, I did not like the direction we were going in Ontario when the Conservatives came into power. It's somewhat difficult to remember the context before COVID, but there were slashes to education. There was an effort to increase class size. There was turmoil with teachers yet again in Ontario, teacher strikes. There was a move towards online education, which was one of the issues the teachers were upset about. And keep in mind, this is before COVID. So budget cuts, cuts to capital investment in schools, which everything from renovating schools to if they need new ventilation systems and all the things that now are so prevalent to us. So there was that. There was the slashing of the health budgets. There was the climate change denying rhetoric coming from Doug Ford and the Conservatives. And, it was shades of Mike Harris again, but, with issues that are so in your face now, such existential issues that we all face.
But the world has changed, and you're completely correct. And at that time, a year ago, pre-COVID, Justin Trudeau in the federal election effectively ran against Doug Ford and Doug Ford policies, and was quite successful in that regard because Doug Ford was in the basement in public opinion polls. That said, the world has changed post-COVID. Yeah. Doug Ford has done what most people think is a reasonably good job. He's listened to the scientists, and his poll numbers are up. So what do you think about how he's handled COVID and all those things that you just mentioned? Are they still relevant today?
Sure, they are relevant today. And he's done a competent job of dealing with the health experts and listening to the health experts. And you got to give him that without question. He's listening to them. But if the standard for our politicians is that they listen to science and they do what the health experts say they should do, if that's the standard, it's not that high a standard.
Well, some politicians that we see south of the border don't actually meet that standard.
Well, without question, but there are some who go way beyond that. But if anyone really believes that as we go through this pandemic and how governments are just trying to deal with things on a file by file basis and just trying to cope with all the emergencies, which is not easy. Granted, it's not easy. But if anyone believes that the Conservatives and Doug Ford are going to want to have equitable policies that deal with the environment in a serious way, that deal with a fair tax system so that there are higher taxes for the wealthy, that there's a proper redistribution of wealth, that our schools are funded properly and with a vision for the future, not just term by term, that our healthcare system is funded properly. I can just hear the speeches that are going to be made when things start to settle down is, well, we've spent so much on COVID, we've got to raise taxes, and I'm sure the biggest burden will be on the middle class. We've got to cut back on education. We've got to cut back on health, on infrastructure. We can't give funding to the municipalities as before, and we're definitely not going to deal with climate change. If anyone thinks that's not going to happen, they're living in a dream world. So has the Conservatives been relatively competent? Yeah, if our standard is, Donald Trump and the Republicans, yeah, doing a great job. If the standard are some of the European countries and New Zealand and other countries like that, South Korea and some of the Asian countries, well, we're not doing as good. And as we speak, the numbers are going up again. And not to criticize the Conservatives unfairly, I mean, we're dealing with the biggest health crisis of my generation.
And I do think that if we get a resurgent in infections because of the way the schools are reopening, and you're quite right, the teachers and particularly the teachers union have opposed dramatically the provincial government's policies for reopening up the schools, then I think you will see some negativity toward Doug Ford and his government, and the polls will respond accordingly. That said, so far, maybe it's happened a little bit, but it hasn't happened a lot. And now it's early days. Schools have just reopened, but it's going to be interesting to see. And I've interviewed a bunch of teachers. It appears that a lot of the teacher-pupil ratio issues have almost been solved by parents keeping so many of the kids home, where a lot of the classes are half or three-quarter size just because people are choosing to do online learning and homeschooling.
Well, with my lengthy career as a father with a variety of ages, I have an 8-year-old now, bless her, and she's about to start on Thursday, where my wife and I are taking her to school. We made the difficult choice. Does she go physically to school or does she do online? And we went through, like so many other parents, the online classes. But we felt it was important, and she goes to a great school, and it's a public school. But we get the emails and have seen all the planning, and we think it's important for her, and it's also important to make sure that the health measures are there and that she's careful and we're careful and all the rest of it. But it's very stressful, and it's very stressful for the kids. And we have many friends who say, you know what, we're not sending our kids to the school. We're going to do the online thing until we see what happens. Well, who has a crystal ball? Who knows what's going to happen? For all in a few weeks, there's going to be a shutdown again. So, it's tough. But undoubtedly, there are going to be all kinds of changes, both with the ratio of in-school teaching and classes and online classes as we go through the ups and downs of COVID.
I had a poster on my show last week, and I asked him how Stephen Del Duca is doing. And he said, Stephen who?
Well, Brian, that's not the first time. How many times have you heard that? Whether it's Joe Clark or Jimmy Carter or Barack Obama, when someone comes on the scene, that's a typical, cynical reaction. But until there's gearing up for an election, until, people have choices to make, that's when you start paying attention. People aren't paying that much attention in Ontario to the politics. Because we Canadians have done a really good job of, no matter what political party, of trying to be on the same page. Municipalities, provinces, and the federal government. We've done a really admirable job. And, I've spoken to friends of mine in the United States, and they make that whenever I say, so how's it going wherever you are, California, New York, whatever. Well, it's tough, and, the fighting with our politicians. And when I tell them that there really isn't any fighting going on here, that people are on the same page, it's astounding to them. So, that's the environment right now. But when people are worried about, their incomes, food on the table, where they're going to live, what their job security is, if they have a job, what their businesses are going through. So that's what people are focusing on, and their kids and their families, right?
In the last election, the NDP in your riding got almost 50%, 49.60% of the vote. That's, a pretty good percentage. And the Liberal and Conservative vote was almost equal in the low 20%. How can you overtake that?
Well, all kinds of things happen in politics. And look, it's like, if I succeed, I succeed. If I don't, I don't. If the Liberals do, they do. If they don't, they don't. But you either get involved or not. And I was just at a stage in my life where I thought, you know what, I have the skills, I have the experience. I know a lot of people in this area. I know this area very well, and I want to make a difference. And things change in politics. They can change overnight. I mean, George H. Bush, the senior, he got this coalition together and, dealt with Saddam Hussein and whatever. And the opinion polls were dramatically high for him. And a year later, he was thrown out of office. There are lots of examples in Canadian politics about that. So for me, it isn't, oh, gee, I might not win. The Liberals might not do good. Nobody knows, what's going to happen. Stephen Del Duca just became the leader. Oh, no, I'm not going to get involved. Like, that's just not who I am. I'm involved because I want to be involved. And if I win, I win. If I don't.
Has the nomination date been called yet?
No, not yet. So I've started pretty early. And in fact, I started thinking about it, and some people were talking to me about it way before COVID. It was like the early fall when I started to think about, maybe it's always been something I've been interested in. I've been involved in politics all my life. And I thought, you know what, maybe this is the right time. And I've kept at it. And there are a lot of people I respect who want to help me. So, let's see what happens.
Awesome. If you're elected and the Liberals form government and you're in cabinet and you had a choice, what would be your preferred portfolio?
Oh my, oh God. You know what? It's so presumptuous, right? To say that. I could tell you, but I wouldn't be so presumptuous. I have a strong ego, but I'm not an egomaniac, and I have some degree of humility. And And I can tell you, it would be an honor to be elected. Even if I was in opposition, I would find it a fascinating, honorable thing to do, to be able to criticize policy, government policy that you object to, and try to bend public opinion and try to get the government act in the way that you think they should act. That would be great.
Okay, so you haven't told me the portfolio, but if there is an issue then, if there's an issue, and you've talked about education, but if there's an issue that you're passionate about that you really wanted to have an impact on, what would it be?
There are, like, these days, to have one issue, is pretty narrow-minded. But I can tell you, climate change, the environment, that alone, as we all know, is an existential threat. And it's happening now, right? Like, we're just watching what's going on the West Coast. I've like many people, I have friends on the West Coast in Vancouver, and I was just in touch with one of them, and they played the sirens that are going on in Vancouver, but it's not from Vancouver. It's from south of the border. And he was saying, we've never heard a siren from our apartment. And listen to this. It's a nonstop thing. The West Coast is burning from climate change. So there's so many portfolios that are involved in the environment. So any portfolio that would have, or any issue that dealt with that would be great. The justice system. I've been a lawyer all my adult career. I've had human rights cases, constitutional cases about fairness.
Is there institutional racism in our justice system?
For sure there is. Like, clearly. And the fact that so many people and so many government representatives around the world recognize that now, other than the yahoos who we know who they are, but it's clearly recognized now, and it's made people have to stop and think about why it is that the percentage of incarcerated people in Canada too. We have our own huge discrepancies in terms of people in the prison system who are not white. The percentage is so high with respect to
it's terrible in regards to blacks, but also First Nations. It's unbelievable.
Sure.
So if you become Attorney General, I hope you make a big change there. So the riding includes the theater district, the entertainment district. You've been an actor. You've been a musician in addition to being a lawyer. The people you'd represent are a lot of those restaurants along Queen West and King West, and a lot of the theater entertainment district. Actors and musicians have been hurt big time by COVID-19. Restaurants, you already mentioned, have been hurt big time. Any ideas there?
A lot of ideas. Well, my wife, Anissa, is a dancer. She's a graduate of the National Ballet. She became a contemporary dancer, worked in some of the biggest Canadian productions around and dance companies. All of her friends, dancers. She has a dance company that she has with a partner to deal with events and all those kind of things. All of her friends, I know them. They're not only have their small incomes. You don't get paid a lot to be a dancer or a musician or a writer or an actor unless you're a leading participant in the West Wing, right? And now with the devastation of COVID and non-productions and the venues being closed, you also have the time to reflect, like we all do. What has my life been about? I followed my passion, and here I am. And it's not like things are going to open up. Venues are going to open up, in a half a year, or there'll be a vaccine and people will be flocking to the theaters or the restaurants or whatever. And speaking of the restaurants and the bars and the hospitality industry, so many people in the performing arts, the independent artists, that's where they're able to pay the rent as they go to auditions and rehearsals and performances. So that whole area, the arts, which is so prevalent in Spadina, Fort York, in the downtown Toronto area, has been beyond devastated. So one of the ideas I just had the other day is look at all these big venues, these theaters that are closed. And their argument as to why they're closed is it costs too much to run it. And we can't really do any productions because of social distancing and all the rules and all the rest of it. Well, doesn't mean you can't have some things going on so that you can have some of the starving and struggling performing artists in Toronto do something in these huge venues. In times, in troubled times, there's nothing like the arts that inspire people and make them feel good about themselves. And, you know, you're walking around with your kids and it's depressing on Queen Street and everybody's faces are long. And if you can see them because of the masks, wouldn't it be nice to see a little dance ensemble in the park, in Grange Park? Wouldn't it be nice to hear musicians on the street? And why wouldn't they be paid? And speaking of the big venues, how much public funding do they get? Tons over the years. So much of their charitable contributions from big corporations, the banks and insurance companies, all the rest of it. Well, maybe they should pay back and make it their duty to give some kind of ability for the performing artists, the struggling performing artists, the tens of thousands of them in this district, to be able to perform their art, uplift the community, and be able to pay the rent. That's
Barry,
what I do.
Let me turn around the question you asked John Lennon and ask you if people are motivated by this conversation and they want to help you in your mission. How can they help you?
Well, they can, well, you know what John Lennon said? John Lennon said to me, well, help me by helping yourselves, right? And he told me to do various things for peace. But anyways, thanks for asking that question. Right now, the object is for me to be nominated at the Liberal nomination meeting, which hasn't been called yet. Will it be called by the end of the year? I don't know. It might be the beginning of next year. So there might be other people wanting to be the candidate for the Liberal Party in Spadina Fort York. So the way to help me is to join my campaign, join Spadina Fort York Liberal Provincial Association as a member. It's free now. Stephen Del Duca did a great thing. He, a few months ago, made it so that to join membership in a provincial Liberal Riding Association, the cost was nothing. So if you go to my website, Jerry Levitan, JerryLevitan.ca, it talks about me, gives you information about me, and indicates how you can become a member. You can also contact me, and my email address is on my website, and I'd be happy to tell you what I'm about, hear what you're about, and how you can help me.
I do think that John Lennon's answer is also probably appropriate, given the issues that you're motivated by and the change that you want to make. If people do help you by helping themselves, by getting involved wherever they are, in whatever politics it might be, and having a point of view, and getting out and voting and campaigning and getting involved and talking about politics, that will in the end help you in your mission. So Jerry Levitan, candidate for the Liberal Party nomination in Spadina Fort York, good luck. Very impressive resume, great background, good conversation. I wish you all the best. Thank you very much for joining us. We're going to take a final break, and I'm going to come back with some closing comments in just a second. Stay with us. Well, welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. You know, I thought that was a really interesting interview. You know, he's got a reasonable chance of winning both the nomination as well as the election, but in politics, you never know. And the provincial election is not going to be until October 2022. So therefore, everything can change. And in politics, you know, 2 years is eternity. 2 weeks is a long time. I think in last several elections, people have made up their mind, or at least the swing voters have made up their mind in the last 10 days, if not, frankly, less than that. He's planning and organizing a long time ahead of time, and all bets are off. But one of the reasons why I wanted to to interview him and to allow you to listen to his background is the varied background. Too many politicians that we get that run for politics, I worry, are in their the beginning of their career rather than midway through or near the end of their career. This gentleman's been a litigation lawyer. He's been a musician. He's been an actor. He's been a writer. He's produced films. What an incredibly interesting background for someone that's going to end up being in politics and representing us and putting forward the laws and formulating the laws. They're going to be running the province if he's successful. And I think that's fantastic. And an incredibly varied background, because too many people have only been a lawyer or only been a teacher or a union member or whatnot. So I think that that's positive. And then I think the other thing is that his policies are so varied. He talked about the justice system and systemic racism within the justice system. He talked about climate change and how he's passionate about that. He talked about arts and culture and how critically important it is in small businesses. And so therefore there are numerous different policies that are critically important to us that we need to be aware of. And then I guess the final reason why I wanted to have him on is to motivate, hopefully, some of you to get involved in politics. Because the only way we're going to make change is if we either run, or if we don't run, get involved, or if we don't get involved, just become a member and vote, or spend a little bit of money donating, or just go to out an election and vote. And so critically important. Too many good people run for politics, get involved in politics, and don't get enough support from their communities. And so therefore, if you're at all motivated, help him or help someone else out that's running in your own area. Anyway, that's my pitch for today. Brian Crombie and the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I come to you every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock. You can stream me online. I'm on the radio at 6:90 a.m. I'm streamed online at www.saga960am.ca, or you can get all my podcasts and video casts after the fact at briancrombie.com. Thanks so much. Appreciate you joining me. Good night.